So, the modern day mixing engineer's dilemma. Now, mixing engineers are in this position where they have to get their artist's approval, right? And producers too. It's all kind of the same. Producers, mixers, music makers, they're getting their artist's approval, and level is part of that because the artist has not been listening to a million mixes out there. They've been listening to a million masters out there, and they're comparing your finished work as a mixing engineer, producer, what have you, as essentially also a mastering engineer. So these mixing engineers are in a position where they kind of have to present something that almost feels done. And sometimes they're actually not too happy about that because it's not quite their wheelhouse, or they feel a little bit like they might have done something different if they didn't have to get that approval, or maybe they're just competing against somebody else for the gig and they have some additional pressure. So there's a lot of reasons why they might feel pressured to push something further than where they really feel it should be naturally. But nevertheless, they're in this predicament, and whatever happens ends up happening, and they are ready for mastering, and they've pushed this thing, and it's basically already to level. Now, what does a mastering engineer do at that point? Well, level is not the end game. It's really, again, about feeling connected to that music. Sure, level is part of that, and size is part of that, and excitement and impact is all part of that. But what does this track need so I feel fully connected to it? And level is not the only factor in that. So consider this. Loudness is loudness for loudness' sake, and on the platforms you'll get penalized for that and everything will be turned down. Or the listener themselves will turn down the volume knob, and that's the worst thing you want. You never want anybody turning down your music because they can't find that sweet spot for where it really fills the car or their headphones, or fills the space in general, so they can really feel like they're immersed in this thing. You know, it's just all around them. You want them to turn it up to that magic sweet spot, and then you want them to never touch that again and not feel like they have to. That's just part of not getting in the way of the fan experiencing the artist in its best form, right? So what do we do when something comes into mastering and it's already up to level, or maybe even too far? Well, we have to figure out, okay, maybe it's up to level, but am I fully connected to that? Do I want to turn it down? Do I want to introduce some compression because maybe it's too loud in terms of its peak level, but it feels hollow, right? It doesn't feel like it's really moving. It doesn't feel like the elements within the mix are fully interacting in an opportune way. A lot of times I'll just introduce a little bit of compression or glue, and I'll actually come in measured wise lower than the mix came to me. But that's okay because I'm plenty loud enough, and if I were to listen to one and then the other, you're going to choose where I left it because it feels musically superior. In other words, you want to listen to that one more, and that's all that should matter. You know, if you're starting to measure tenths of a dB or a half a dB, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, what you want are the people to just love this end result. They want to feel connected to this music. And if you need to change the level a little bit, as long as it's up to level, and as long as it's ready for release and it's within that parameter and you're good to go, a tenth here, a tenth there is arbitrary. It doesn't actually matter. So what if I'm presented with a mix that is really hyped, right? I will not listen to that mix in terms of its level. I'm going to be listening to that mix just the way it hits me and impacts me. And let's say it's very hyped, maybe the clap and the 808 and the kick, if I'm working on a hip hop track, is just very, very hyped, but they're not connected, right? It's just a very aggressive clap, and it's very aggressive 808 and a very aggressive kick, and maybe the vocals are really compressed, and everything's up in your face, but I'm not grooving to it. I'm almost feeling like I want to turn it down, right? So what I'll do is I'll turn the whole thing down, all the way down, and then I'll turn it up into my processes, maybe my compression that's just working a little bit, and my limiting that's just working a little bit, and my EQ that's flat but ready to be worked with, all of these processes just ready for prime, and I'll turn it up until I feel like I don't want to turn it up anymore. I won't even be conscious of how loud it started out as. I'm in a new place now. I'm turning it up until it just feels, okay, this is my zone of where I feel fully connected to it, and now that I'm in this zone, I'm doing my vibe work or my corrective work just to make sure that that clap is singing with that 808 and that kick and that vocal, and everything's moving around and swirling around, keeping my focus, keeping myself connected to that music. And now I print. I print and I commit. And at that point, once I'm done, now I compare against where I started. And maybe, just maybe, I'm 2 tenths lower than where that mix actually was. But if I listen to the mix and I listen to the master, I'm leaning towards the master because that one has the good stuff. That one has the ultimate feel, the ultimate connectivity, and I guarantee you, the surprising thing is that the artist, the producer, everybody involved is going to approve that one because that one has the good stuff, right? They're not going to be so concerned about a tenth there or tenth there. They are concerned about how do they feel when they put on this recording. And the funny thing is that getting maximum hot level, you're just going to get penalized on the platforms anyway. So what you want to go for is the most connective end result you can achieve. And usually if it's an aggressive type of recording, you're going for size more than measured level. And when you play it on the platforms, it fills up the space and it feels great. So those are a few things to consider, and just a few other things to think about as you're exploring your mastering journey.
Hey, what about this button? Or the subscribe button.